Hi, it's Charlene with Blown Over Board Games, and I'm going to give you my 2023 year in review. Now, I know it's a little bit late to be putting this video out there, but I did want to take the time to talk about 2023 because for me, 2023 is the year I view as the year I really got into the board game hobby. Now, I'd played board games before, been over to friends' house several times to play games like Seven Wonders, Codenames, Telestrations, even Battlestar Galactica in there. And I always really loved playing and was always like, yes, invite me over to play more board games. But it wasn't until the pandemic that I started getting my own board games. And so 2020 hit, and I suddenly had a lot of free time on my hands. And I Googled best solo board game. And in 2020, there was like one answer that came up over and over again. So the first board game I bought that started it all was Gloomhaven, which is pretty much diving into the deep end, if you will. So that's where I started. I tried playing it solo. It was a little much for me to play solo, but I still really love this game. It has like sentimental value because it was the first game I got. Also, it was cheaper then. Like inflation has like increased the price of this game by like 50%. I enjoy playing it with other people much more than I enjoyed playing on my solo. So I still keep it around, and basically I get to play it once a year when my siblings and I are together for the holidays. We spend a day playing Gloomhaven. I also now play the video game version, which is great because you can play it over the network with people you're not with. So sometimes my brother and I will play the video game version. And of course, you have a lot less upkeep to worry about there. It's a really excellent implementation. So there it is, Gloomhaven. Prior to 2023, there were a few other games that kind of ended up in the collection as I was kind of slowly trying to convince my family members to also enjoy board games so that I would have reason to have more. That kind of started with one year for Christmas. I got my dad Ticket to Ride because he loves trains. And if having the original Ticket to Ride wasn't enough, in 2022, my godmother got me Ticket to Ride London for Christmas, which is sort of all the joy of Ticket to Ride in a smaller, quicker package if you're looking for a fast game to play. There are a few other games in my family's collection. My sister had the trivia game All of Us, which we enjoy playing it as a family because of the multiple generations we spanned. Also, Codenames made it into the collection. I think I bought this for the family, but I'm not sure, someone else might have picked it up as well. And then finally, the pre-2023 collection also included Bonanza, which came from my brother and sister-in-law. They brought it one year, and it sort of stayed with me. At that point, I didn't know who Louis Rosenberg was, and now I do, and so it's sort of cool that one of the first games started out with one of his. Now, in this year of being part of the board game hobby, I've started to learn more about board games and my tastes, and I've learned that I'm pretty happy playing almost anything. I like board games themselves. I like doing a social activity. Or even a solo activity that's not involving screens. I like the mechanical feel because you have to like move stuff around, and it has a tactile presence. But I'm also starting to learn about kind of the mechanics I prefer and the mechanics I don't prefer. But even when it's mechanics I don't prefer, I'll still play those games as well. And I've also learned that mechanics aside, sometimes certain games click with you and certain games don't. So it's been interesting to see what's come up in that way in 2023. Now, in 2023, I played board games in three basic ways. The in-person tabletop games that I own. I also played board games on Board Game Arena. And then finally, I ended up with a few board games where I played their digital implementations via Steam. First off, on Steam, I ended up picking up 4 games. I have played Castles of Burgundy, Root, Viticulture, and Wingspan. And I've had very different reactions to these games. Castles of Burgundy, instantly loved it. I will be buying a tabletop edition at some point. I've got my eye. They've got a reprint coming of the special edition. So maybe that. I do keep my eye out on the secondhand market as well. It's just a great game. Deserves the praise it has. Well designed, interesting. You can try different tactics. And even though the digital implementation is a little plain graphics wise, I think it still gets across what's so great about the game. Now, I did not find that to be true about Viticulture, even though these digital implementations were done by the same company. For whatever reason, I just couldn't get into Viticulture. And I've heard it's a great game, so it is one of those things where I'm like, maybe I'll try the tabletop edition, see how that changes how I feel. But I even went back and played it again in preparation for this video, and I was still like, didn't feel the pull to keep playing. And again, as I said earlier, there's that discovery where like some games click with you and some games don't. You know, even, and sometimes it's a surprise. I would have thought Viticulture seems right up my alley because I like wine and I like worker placement. But at least in the digital implementation, I'm just not really drawn to it. I found that to also be true about Root, which I gather is sort of a very divisive game. Some people love it and some people hate it. And in the digital implementation, I just could not get into it. I just could not wrap my head around the different factions fast enough to like feel like I was enjoying the game or like had a clear strategy. And I don't think that's entirely about difficulty, because I do find as I'm playing more and more games that I'm longing for higher difficulty games than like my family tends to enjoy. Just something about Root doesn't appeal to me, but I know I'm not alone. I know there are a lot of people who vehemently disagree with me, and I know there are a lot of people who vehemently agree with that. So it is what it is. But then on the win side was the digital version of Wingspan. What a beautiful game, even in video game format. And what's so funny about this is that I introduced it to my sister, and we played on my computer one day when she was visiting. And like she went home that day and bought herself a copy. And then when my brother visited for the holidays, we introduced Wingspan to him. And then when he got home, you know how you can see like the activity of your friends on Steam? I sort of noted, it was like, oh, your brother has added Wingspan to his wish list. So now he has it also. So I've been spreading the Wingspan love. We don't have a tabletop version of it. I don't feel like I need the tabletop version, which I guess is one, like the great side to video game versions is two, they're much more affordable, and second, they don't take up actual space. Sometimes they make you want to get the game and other times they don't. I think with Wingspan, I feel really happy with the digital version, but I may instead get the tabletop version of Wormspan instead of a Wingspan, and then you kind of have both games available in different forms. But also I have made, and one of my sister's coworkers, it turns out, has the tabletop version of Wingspan. So we do have it available to us. It's a beautiful game, as people say. So that's my Steam experience. Then on Board Game Arena, I played some games that were random, and then some with people through a Facebook group I'm on, and sometimes I played games I was really interested in learning more about. So it was a bit of a mix. So the games I played on Board Game Arena in 2023 were Biomos, Lost Ruins of Arnak, A Feast for Odin, Bandito, Welcome to Your Perfect Home, Draftsider, and Obsession. I will say I had similar experience to the Steam where some games instantly clicked for me and others not. Like I instantly loved A Feast for Odin. What a cool game. And I guess the nice part about playing it on Board Game Arena is you don't have to worry about losing the million different tiles it comes with, right? But that also made me think I really want to experience more of Rosenberg's games and see what they're like and find my favorite. Lost Ruins of Arnak, I played a couple times. Again, it's another favorite, and it just didn't click for me. For me, it felt like the game ends too quickly. Like I felt like I hadn't really gotten anywhere by the time the game ends, both the 2 or 3 times I played it on Board Game Arena. Welcome to Your Perfect Home, a roll and write. I don't know that roll and writes work as well digitally, because I think part of the joy of that that mechanic is definitely the like physical nature of it. But I do want to play it more to see what I think about it. My opinion I haven't fully formed on that game yet. Oh, and then Obsession is the other game I'm like trying to figure out. Now I've played 3 or 4 times on Board Game Arena, and it still hasn't quite all clicked for me. And again, it feels like a game that should be an instant love for me because of the theme. A big Jane Austen fan, and it just hasn't like made sense in my brain yet. But it's another game where I think like I want to try it in person to see if it feels like I can make more sense of it in person. So there's where we are on Board Game Arena games. Now, I really started building my collection in the summer of 2023 when the local board game store had their annual flea market. So I went and I picked up a few games, and here are the ones from that haul that I played in 2023. Guilds of London. Now, I picked this one up because of the theme. You know, like I said, at this point, this was kind of my first purchasing. I didn't know a lot of games, so I wasn't looking for specific things. I was just seeing what caught my eye. And this game takes place in the medieval era, and I'm a Shakespearean, which is, not too far removed from the medieval era, and there's you kind of have to understand those medieval influences to also understand the Elizabethan age. I like the game's mechanics, but there is like this big caveat where in the sort of map of the game, there is also a plantation in Ulster and a plantation in Virginia that you can send workers to, and I just don't think that word choice was thought about. Now, obviously, they're using the word in a different context from American chattel slavery, but it was sort of it kind of took us back when we opened up the game and we were like, oh, we're building a plantation. Is that really necessary? And the thing is, like, it's not necessary. It's like a side quest to the game, and I think the game would just be better without it. I've learned that, like, one of the things I don't like in games is I don't enjoy games that sort of are celebrating colonialism or imperialism, or sort of like asking you to perform those actions and like feel good about winning. So that's kind of my caveat with this game. I do kind of like the way the board game is built during the game as you kind of lay out tiles and things like that. So I have mixed feelings about this. I'm going in order of like how I stacked them on the Florida Prep, and I'm afraid like we're like hitting the sort of downer section. Because another game I picked up in that haul was Sinister Six, and this is where I learned that some games are just badly designed. Again, it's got a really nice artwork, great box. It's Spider-Man IP, and it's a semi-co-op. We tried it, and I like made us play the game 3 times to make sure we weren't misunderstanding it, because it just like wasn't working and it wasn't satisfying. And after 3 times and some Googling other reviews, I was like, oh no, it's not us. It's the game. It just like makes it really difficult to kind of get through the game progress. And then like when you do get to the end, you kind of just have to like design the way you're going to play in order to win. And so it's not very satisfying. So this will be the first board game I get rid of. So that's an important milestone too, I think, in the hobby. Moving on to some games that we liked more. We picked up Metro. This is just a great tile laying game, route building, where you're just sort of ostensibly laying metro lines in Paris. It's great fun because you're trying to strategize yourself, but you're also trying to keep track of what other people are doing to see if you can beat them to certain places or block their lines or make their lines shorter. Metro's one we're enjoying. We also played Indulgence in 2023. Indulgence is simply a trick-taking game with the theme of the Italian Renaissance laid on it. It's pretty straightforward. One thing I've started to learn in 2023 is like card games are not my favorite mechanic, so I would not naturally gravitate to this game over other games. And honestly, like I know it's popular, but I feel the same way about Bonanza. And I think that's just because a game based in cards, it's just not my favorite. Okay, the last game I got in the summer 2023, Amazed by Neil Patrick Harris. Now, I picked up this game because I forgot to mention this previously, I also got Box 1, and which is designed as a solo experience, and that you can only play once. And I played it through once and then passed on to a friend, and I really enjoyed it. And so I was hoping for something similar. This will be the second game I pass on of my collection. Unfortunately, so it's a trivia game. Let's see, how do I describe it? One of the features it boasts about itself is this kind of like changeable game board where you can flip the sides and move pieces to change the shape and roots of the game board. But unfortunately, the game board does not actually affect gameplay, because however you set it up, there is a real clear path to the winner spot. And the way it works is each spot on the game board has a different color on it, and that color is associated with the difficulty of the trivia question you have to answer to move forward. And so they could have made it where it's like, oh, this route is easier questions, but you have to go more squares, and this route is clearly shorter, but you have to answer much more difficult questions. And there's some of that, but there's still, we found a very clear choice which path to take. And that kind of took some of the excitement out of the game. And then ultimately we kind of found it a little anticlimactic, because you'd be like getting questions wrong, struggling, and then all of a sudden you get a question right, boom, and the game would be over. So I just didn't feel a lot of replayability in this one for me. But I think if you're like really into trivia and riddles, you might enjoy this game more than I did. And then after the haul I got from the local board game store flea market, you may have seen like the very first video on my channel was an unboxing from Noble Knight Games. So then I got a series from them. And these are the games that I played in 2023 from that order. First off is Biblios Quill and Parchment. Again, I picked this up because it had this sort of medieval monk scribe theme to it. It looked interesting. It's a roll and write. I have learned that I do quite enjoy roll and writes. I wasn't sure about this one initially. I started by playing the solo variant, which is not quite as good as the full game. And I also thought, I didn't know if this game was sort of complicated enough to be one of my favorites, but I found it to be really popular with other people. So I took it with me on a camping trip with friends, and it was just like the perfect game for the end of the day after, we had kids in the group to watch after, and the adults were just trying to unwind. And so we actually played this several times over the course of a weekend. And then when I introduced my family, they liked it too. And I think, again, because it's a little bit easier to pick up, and then once you pick it up, you kind of figure out how to strategize and move on from there. And then in 2023, I only actually played one other game from that haul, and the others were still left on my unplayed shelf to get to in this year. So the second game I've played from there is City Skylines. This is a co-op game where you're dealing with polyomino tiles and trying to build a city while maintaining trash and pollution and water and other utilities, trying to balance all these needs of the city. We got this to the table once in 2023 and a couple more times so far this year. I think we're still trying to figure out the best approach and everything. So I'm still exploring this game and also exploring it. I want to play it more both with other people and solo. Finally, in 2023, I picked up 3 other games individually. First off, I got a used copy of a game that was a must-have on my list, and that's Seven Wonders. Now, Seven Wonders is one of those games I mentioned that I had played prior to really getting into the board game hobby, and what I loved about it was, I think it's well designed in terms of when you're reading the cards on the boards, you can sort of figure out what you need to figure out with the icons. But also what I loved about it is all the end of game scoring, and that you really have no idea who's in the lead until you add it all up, and that there are so many multiple pathways to victory. I find this game very replayable, so I had to have it. I'm very happy to have a copy of it in my collection now. I suppose next up is starting to explore the expansions, which I know are also pretty well reviewed and held in esteem. In 2023, I also started learning about just how big the board game industry is. And in that I mean, if you find a mechanic you like, that mechanic exists in a myriad of ways. And so for me, I also realized I had to start thinking about what theming excited me, because there's so many different games out there. And so that led to this purchase, Sanssouci. This is a tile laying game where you're building the grounds at Sanssouci Palace in Germany. And I had to have this because I have been to Sanssouci Palace. It's outside of Berlin. And so I visited there on a very special trip I took. And there were just so many connections on that trip where I saw a painting of Sanssouci Palace in an art museum, and then in another museum I saw like instruments that had been at the event at Sanssouci Palace that the painting was about, and then I went and saw Sanssouci Palace. So that's just me to say that, like, find the themes that excite you, that mean something to you, because you can't have all the board games, and you don't need all the board games. Okay, the final game I bought in 2023 was Hadrian's Wall. Of course, it's considered one of the best solo games out there. It took the roll and write genre to a new place, and everything I read that convinced me to buy this has turned out to be right. I love this game. I love the, like, filling in the boxes and, like, figuring out what you can get and how you can keep your turn going. And it was definitely my most played game in 2023, even getting it near the end of the year. And I continue to play this in this year, and will continue for many more games to come, I'm sure. All right, so that's about 26 games, I think, if I counted right, that I played in 2023. How do you feel about some of these games, and what should I try next? Thanks for watching.